this all tonight so that you know what to look out for. And I particularly find it with people that are new to the serger, but it's just as easy to make even if you've been sewing on it for years, because I still make some of these mistakes, but I'm aware of them, so I don't make them very often. Is that better? Is my sound okay? Right. So what I'm going to do is I've done a lot of this on a slide presentation because it allows me to really get close and point things out to you. At the very end, I'm going to show you something on the machine, but this is mostly going to be a slide presentation tonight. So let's move on to it. And I titled it The 3 Easiest Ways to Damage a Serger and Have Costly Repairs. And as I said earlier, I will sleep better tonight because I've told you all, so you all know about them now. So, of course, the most obvious one is pins. It's so easy when you're serging not to notice a pin in there. So the answer to that is to always place your pins parallel to the raw edge, about 1¼ inches. And that way, they're never going to touch your knife, which is where the damage comes. So always when you're sewing, pin well in from the raw edge. And if by chance you don't take a pin out, and I normally take my pins out as I go, but if you don't take a pin out, there's no risk of you damaging your knife. So that is my first tip. And my next tip is I want to talk about the stitch finger because most of the dangers come from the stitch finger. So the knife cuts the fabric. You have your knife up. The knife cuts the fabric just the right width for the stitch finger to lay the stitch down on the edge of the fabric. When you move the knife, the stitch finger moves in line with it. Okay, so you can always have a look at that. If you move your knife, you will see the stitch finger move. And you can see here, I've got a red arrow going to the stitch finger, and I've got a green arrow going to the knife, and they're directly in line with each other. So when you put your knife down, it can be very dangerous. If you have too much fabric to the right of your stitch finger, it can get wrapped around the looper and it can break or bend them. There is a large unprotected hole on the right of the stitch finger. Never let fabric overlap the stitch finger. Okay, that's the benefit of keeping the knife up. Even if you don't want to cut and you're just feeding it in close to the knife's there to protect the stitch finger. So don't let that fabric overlap and get into that where that red arrow is, where it can wrap around the upper looper and break it, bend it, break it. My next tip is again to do with the stitch finger. The stitch finger is quite fragile. So the stitches, when you run a thread chain or even when you're stitching, the stitches sit on your stitch finger until the fabric comes back and collects them. So what if the fabric is slow to get there, or the stitches lock up on the stitch finger and the fabric stops moving? Now, this is something that happens a lot to people who are new to the serger, and actually it really can depend on which serger you have. Some sergers are much better at not getting locked up on their stitch finger than others. But it's just good practice to always pull back on your thread chain and clear the stitch finger before you place the fabric under the foot. That way you know you're not going to get a lockup, because, let's go on, if you get a jam on your stitch finger and put the fabric under the foot, you may notice that your fabric is not moving. And I'm going to say at this point, stop and panic, because what normally happens, and I had this happen in class a lot, is people press down harder on the foot pedal to try and move it faster to confirm that it's not moving. And what you get is you get lots of threads caught around your looper and a total jam with the fabric firmly attached to your stitch plate, and they're held on by the stitches underneath attached to the looper. So you've got yourself in a pickle. So how are you going to deal with that? Well, you can try and cut the threads under your stitch plate, but it's quite difficult to reach them. You will probably have to remove your stitch plate. And this is another way where you can get damage. Remember I said you can get build-up of stitches that will bend, that will attach your fabric to the plate. But this is another place where you can damage your stitch finger. So no matter which serger you have, to avoid any damage, always remove your stitch finger. And to do that, it's going to be different for many machines, but probably similar. So always check in your manual before you move your sorry, didn't mean stitch finger. I actually meant your stitch plate. The fact is, if you try to put your stitch plate back onto your machine, or even take it off, it will bend the stitch finger because it just will not go. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I think that leads me into, I'm going to tell you common ways to move the stitch finger easily, and I'm also going to demo it in a minute. But most baby lock machines, it's just a case of moving your stitch length dial to the rolled numbers. And here you can see I've got my rolled numbers and my standard numbers, and that is the stitch length dial. It's the bottom dial, it's the biggest dial, and you have it on the rolled numbers when you do a rolled hem. And when you do a rolled hem, you move the stitch finger. So that's what you need to do when you start to move your stitch plate. Now I'm just going to show on the Bernina L890 because they have a different system, and it shows you that there are different systems for this. They only have to move their overlock lever to the rolled. Okay, they don't have the rolled numbers, they have overlock and rolled, and it's actually on their stitch plate. So as soon as they move that to R for rolled, it's going to remove the stitch finger. So let me go on to let me just go on to questions, and then I'll demo removing the stitch plate, which is hugely important because you need to clean under it too. So do I have any questions, Richard? No? Nobody's asked me any questions? Okay. He is up to date. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move you onto my machine, and I'm going to show you how to move the stitch finger. No, the stitch plate, sorry. Well, actually, and the stitch finger. Yeah. So let's do that. So here's my machine. I've got my tools out, and I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to move my foot so that you can see more clearly what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to raise my needles up high, and it's like I said to you, I'm going to remove my stitch finger. So there's my stitch finger. I don't know if you can see it. There's 3 prongs there, and it's the one on the right. And as soon as I move to my rolled numbers, you're going to see it disappears. And that's absolutely what has to happen when you're going to move your stitch plate. So I'm going to open my machine, and I'm going to take, this is a Phillips one for the baby lock. I think many of them have this. And I'm going to operate the screwdriver, which is, I'm like a pig with a musket with a screwdriver. Richard will be laughing at me. Right. Okay, so I'm going to take my screw and put it somewhere safe so I'm not looking for it in 10 minutes. So I've undone the big Phillips screw that was there, and now I've got to get to this one. And you sometimes have to move the loopers out the way. And this one is the same as the needles. You just undo it with your Allen key. And I'm always worried it's going to fall into the machine. So I just do it part of the way and lift the stitch plate. There's that screw. And there's my stitch plate. So I raise my needles. And you can see it's going to come out very easily. I'm going to move it to the left. And that is how to remove the stitch plate. And to put it back in, I'm going to do that. I would do exactly the same thing. But before I do that, let's just talk about cleaning, because that can create a problem too. Now, I have, let me bring you round. It should be right here. I have a small vacuum with a hose and a pointed end. I wouldn't say it's fabulous, but it does the job. I'm sure somebody might have a better recommendation. It just isn't that powerful. It's one that you charge, so I don't know whether that's to do with it. I also have sections for my big Hoover, but I tend to use that more often. And I hoover it out. And then after I've hooved it out, I often find that there's still lots of bits of lint left. So I take a Q-tip and I just put a dab of oil on it to make it moist. And then I have a great time just sort of sticking it in there, picking up all the bits of dust. And I can never quite believe how much dust I get out. So one particular place I think that dust builds up that people forget about is in this area here in the feed dogs. There's always big sections of dust in there. So it's well worth your while to do that. And of course, have your machine maintained. Make sure you have it serviced. But let's go back to the slideshow. And I think I'm just talking about the maintenance. While you have the stitch plate off, take the opportunity to clean it. I recommend a small vacuum cleaner with a nozzle. I also recommend Q-tips with a dab of oil on just to pick up the bits that the vacuum missed. Now, I have no problem with canned air if used correctly. I can open up my machine and blow the air through rather than send the debris into the back of the machine. Now, this is one of those subjects that people feel very strongly about. Some people won't use it. Some people will use it. Some people have been told not to use it. The baby lock maintenance guy has said that it's okay to use the air if you use it correctly. Short bursts keep the can upright. But it's up to you. You know, it's something that you have to feel comfortable with. It's almost, it brings the same emotions on as people saying, do you wash your fabric before you sew it? Okay, so it's not something I want to really spend a lot of time on. You do what you feel you need to do. But I'm going to put the plate back on now. So with my stitch finger still out the way, I'm going to just place it in position. Now, if my stitch finger was there, trust me, it would not go on. It just would not go on. And when you try to force it on, it would bend your stitch finger. So ever so important to know that bit of information. So I'm just going to screw that screw in. And I'm going to add one more thing to this because it's happened to me. So I like to share things. Is one time I put my now I've gone and lost my Allen key, which I had in my hand. One time I put my, that's amazing how I can lose something when I had it. Anyway, I would screw that little screw in with the Allen key. I will find mine. But what I want to say to you is there is a sensor on this. So if you haven't by chance, if your machine, when you shut it up and go to sew again, doesn't sew, just open it up and just redo that last bit of putting the screws in, because there is a sensor on here to prevent the machine working if it isn't in perfect position. Okay, so do I have any questions? I'm going to come back round to the front. Well, you know, Debbie, I think it depends on how much, Debbie says, how often should she have her machine serviced? And I think it depends on how much you use it. I would be guided by your dealer if you're close with your dealer. So yeah, Ruth, I did say short bursts, whole can straight, And do not shake the can. I didn't mention that, did I? So thank you for that. Is there a thread count to determine when professional cleaning is needed? There is no thread count on these machines. And you know, the great thing about these machines, or this machine, is it is mechanical. So it probably doesn't need quite as much attention, you know. So, but you know, see how you're going. I probably have mine done every 2 years now. I use mine a lot. I should probably have it done every year, but I have to tell you that I'm super good at keeping my machine clean, and I actually know enough to take my machine apart and clean it. And the reason that they say to take it in is a lot of the places on these machines that need attention, you have to take the whole casing off to get to it, which isn't something you want to do if you're faint-hearted. And actually, you shouldn't do because I think it will ruin your warranty. So always go to your dealer. So any other questions? Anybody think of any other ways that they have damaged their machine that they want to share? I think there's always the obvious one of pulling and bending your needles, but I don't think that ever. I mean, these machines are pretty robust. I think you've got to go some to damage them. Won't the locked up threads prevent you from moving the stitch finger even though moving it to the rolled hem? No, because the threads are wrapped around the looper and the machine, the stitch plate. Okay, so they've never gotten back to that stitch finger. They've never gotten back there. It's the threads when you have that attaching it to the plate is where the needle is. It never gets back to those threads. But that was a good question. Working with faux fur on the serger, any tips to handle it better? Oh, faux fur, faux fur. It's a fight, isn't it? Um, I've heard things about when I worked with fur, we always trimmed the area we were going to sew right down short. Okay, so all of the edge where we were going to sew, we trimmed that right off, shaved it even. You know, get a fabric shaver and shave it. That will certainly help you. Deb, I have not heard you talk about not using a needle size larger than a 90. I've always been taught not to use larger than 90 because it can mess up the timing. Yeah, I think that's true. I think you'd have a hard time messing up the timing with this machine, but you certainly can quite easily with other machines. Um, yes, I mean, a 90 is big enough for anything. And I've heard people say you shouldn't use a 75, but I have used a 75 when I've done very fine fabric. So, you know, I don't think it will damage your machine using a 75, but I think perhaps going larger than a 90 could be risky. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I had a friend that literally put the foot on back. This is great. I love it. Oh, I had a friend. Oh, okay. There's some good ones coming up. I love it. I tried going over a huge bump without a hump jumper. I forced it. My lower loop had jumped out of its channel and had to be completely replaced. It was a pricey mistake. Interesting. So that's something to be wary of. And you know, whenever I go over anything that's really, really risky, really thick, or end of a zipper, I'm going to hand turn it. Okay. And if there's a lot of force in there, I'm not going to keep turning it because that will break the hand wheel, the cogs in the hand wheel that are plastic. So I think hand turn your weird if you're a little bit nervous or something. I had a friend that literally put the foot on backwards. She hit the pedal and jammed the bar holding the foot extremely hard. $190 to fix it, freak accidental damage. Yes, but it's the sort of thing that can happen to anybody, so it's always worth hearing about. But yes, I've seen people put the foot on backward. And I think sometimes when you look at some of the feet, it's difficult to tell what's front and back. I'm thinking of the elastic foot. I had a wad of thread stuck under my stitch plate. I don't know what I did to cause it, but it was extremely hard to get out. Yeah, that's probably going to be lock up on your stitch finger that's preventing the fabric feeding through, and that will cause the stitches to build up over the needle area and attach to your looper underneath. So we've covered that. So if that did happen to you, you know how to fix it. But I think more than anything, clear your stitch finger before you put your fabric under. I think that's the best preventive of that one. Oh, someone recommended to use press and seal on the edges. We're talking about faux fur. Well, that would save you cutting them. So, that's certainly worth a try. Did I sew slow with the 75 needle? I don't remember, but I have used 75s. Stupid question, but I still don't understand the numbering of the length and width dials. Okay, let's just cover that then. So let me get onto that dial so that I can point it out to you. Oh, I can turn my machine, that's easier. Right, let's get onto it. Right, so we have, this is the width dial, and it has large numbers and small numbers. The large numbers, well, all these numbers relate to the distance from the needles to the knife, okay? So let's go up to 7.5. 7.5 tells me my left needle is 7.5 millimeters from the knife. It says 5 as well, and that 5 tells me that my O2 needle is 5 millimeters from the knife. Okay, so that is the stitch width. As far as the stitch length at the bottom, you have standard numbers and you have rolled hem. And what happens is the standard numbers are the numbers you use for most stitches. The only exception is when you want to do a rolled hem. When you want to do a rolled hem, you turn it to the outline numbers and where it says rolled hem. And that takes away the stitch finger and allows you to sew that narrower stitch. So going back to, I think I turned the hand wheel in the wrong direction. It's loose. I haven't looked up the problem. Yeah, you've probably damaged the plastic cogs. It's not a hugely expensive repair. Guess what? I've done it too. And I actually did it from forcing my machine over something thick. Just had my machine cleaned and serviced after my blade fell off. I couldn't find the screw until I took it in. That's when I found the secret drawer under the needle plate. You know, that secret drawer under the needle plate, if you manage to find a needle on it, then go buy a lottery ticket. Because every time I drop something in, it never ends up on that plate. But good, I'm glad you found it on that plate. I marked an L and a W on the knobs on my Triumph. That helped me remember which was which. Well, another way to do it is when you move that top dial, in other words, the width dial, it moves the knife. So if your knife is moving, you know you're dealing with the width. So I don't think I missed anybody's disasters. Just checking through. That's great. I just finished stitching a satin type fabric. Thought I cleaned it well, but I took off the foot plate and such a lot of fluff left, even stuck to the bottom of the plate. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I think people don't take the stitch plate off to clean underneath it because they're nervous of putting it back on. So I hope tonight's video helped people with that. And somebody said they never found that in the manual. Well, I think I think when we look at something like that, we think if you undo those screws, it will come out. At least I do, read a manual. Richard doesn't read manuals either, do you? No. But yes, it's more than that. You've got to make sure that you move the stitch finger. What oil do you use? I use high quality machine oil, and it's only just to make the Q-tip pick up the dust. Somebody says, always remember the lower dial is the bottom dial for length, L for length. That's a good way to remember it too. Okay, do I have any more questions? I'm home this weekend, and then next week I am at Quilt Beginnings, Columbus, Ohio. So I'm looking forward to going there. Another baby lock instructor taught me that the whittle one is the width. I've never forgotten that. That's really good. I'd love to know who it was. The whittle one, the little one. That's cute. I like that. Um, will doing any of this mess with my warranty? Not what I've told you. You can take your stitch plate out. You should to clean. But I'm not suggesting you take your machine apart, just the stitch plate off. Donna says she's never taken the stitch finger out. Well, you're not really taking it out, you're putting it to bed. There are some machines where you take it out, but for most of them, it's just a question of putting it to bed. Laurie, okay, that's cute. That's cute. I love that. Um, oh, yes, some people here that are going to be at Ohio, so I'm excited about that. How do you loosen the little screw under the needle plate without having the screw fall out? Mine was so tight I lost the screw. Yeah, I agree with you. It's terrifying, isn't it? I As I said to you, I only get it out a bit and then I push up the plate and see if it will come out. I don't want to take that screw all the way out because you just know it's going to fall inside the machine. It is the same type of screw. It's not called a screw. I don't know what it's called. What's it called? Oh, but it's the same one that holds the needles in. I have a spare one, and it's taped to the top of my machine for when I lose one of my needle screws or that screw. Did you discuss when and where to order your machine? No, you're really going to have to take it into the dealer because so many of the places that need oil and grease are inside the machine. A gib screw. A gib screw. Okay, thank you for that. Could we use a magnet to catch the screw before it falls? Yeah, or put a piece of tape underneath it, piece of tape. I don't know. You can have me wake up in the night worrying about that. Don't it won't happen. Think positively, it won't happen. I actually chose to do that demo at the end in case I drop that screw. All I've dropped is my Allen key that I can put it in with. I don't know what happened to it. Oh, maybe I put it in the drawer. Maybe not. I use my magnet wand for picking up pins when I'm taking screws out. It saved me from losing a couple of times. Yeah, they're really good, those magnet things. Have you got mine, Richard? I haven't seen it for a while. No, no, he says, I left it on your desk. Jolan said, and I